The frozen surface of Titan's moon glittered under the distant sun as Jake Morrison crouched behind a ridge of ice and rock. His breath came in short bursts inside his helmet, fogging the display for a moment before the suit's systems cleared it. Around him, the rest of his squad moved like shadows across the barren landscape, their weapons ready, their movements cautious. They had been fighting the Valkorians for 3 years now. 3 long years of battles across moons and asteroids, of watching friends die in the cold of space, of learning to hate an enemy they barely understood. The Valkorians were reptilian, scaled and strong, with technology that matched Earth's own. Nobody really remembered how the war started anymore. All anyone knew was that it had to be won. Jake's radio crackled to life. Captain Lewis Grant's voice came through, sharp and commanding. "Morrison, take your team and sweep that crashed scout ship. Intelligence wants to know what they were doing out here. Eliminate any survivors and secure the wreckage." "Yes, sir," Jake replied, signaling his squad forward. There were 4 of them. Jake, along with Private Danny Cole, Corporal Lisa Barnes, and Private First Class Ben Wright. They had been together for 8 months, long enough to trust each other, long enough to know who would have your back when things went bad. The Valkorian scout ship had crashed hard. It lay half buried in the ice, its hull cracked open like an egg, smoke still rising from its damaged engines. As they approached, weapons raised, Jake felt the familiar tension in his chest. This was always the dangerous part. Wounded enemies were unpredictable, sometimes more dangerous than healthy ones. Danny went in first, his scanner sweeping for life signs. "Got something," he said quietly. Faint readings, deeper in the ship. They moved carefully through the twisted metal corridors. Emergency lights flickered, casting strange shadows. The ship was smaller than the usual Valkorian craft, built for speed rather than combat. Jake wondered what it had been doing so far from their lines. They found the body of a Valkorian pilot in the cockpit, clearly dead from the impact. His dark green scales were scorched, his eyes staring at nothing. Lisa checked him quickly and moved on. They were here for intelligence, not bodies. The life sign reading led them to what looked like a storage compartment near the back of the ship. The door was jammed halfway open, and they could hear something inside. A sound that made Jake freeze. It was crying, not the aggressive hiss of an adult Valkorian warrior, but something softer, younger, afraid. "Stay back," Jake said to his squad. He approached the door carefully and shone his light through the gap. What he saw made his stomach twist. A child. A Valkorian child. No more than 6 or 7 years old by the look of her. She was trapped under a fallen beam. Her pale blue scales covered in dust and her own dark blood. Her eyes were huge and golden, filled with tears. And when she saw Jake's light, she whimpered and tried to crawl away, even though she was clearly hurt. "There's a kid in here," Jake said quietly. Danny came up beside him. "A Valkorian spawn. Orders are clear, Jake. No survivors." Jake stared at the child. She had stopped trying to move and was just watching them now, trembling. He had killed Valkorians before, in combat, in the heat of battle, when it was them or him. But this was different. This was a child, wounded and helpless, looking at him with the same terror he had seen in human children when their colonies were attacked. "Jake," Lisa said softly from behind him, "we have orders." Jake made a decision that would change everything. He lowered his weapon and started working on the jammed door. "Help me get this open." "What are you doing?" Danny asked, his voice sharp with concern. "I'm not killing a kid," Jake said. He put his shoulder to the door and pushed. "You want to shoot me for it, do it. But I'm not doing this." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Ben stepped forward and added his strength to Jake's. Together, they forced the door open enough for Jake to slip through. The child tried to scramble away, but the beam had her pinned. She made a sound that was half hiss, half cry. "Easy," Jake said, knowing she couldn't understand him but hoping his tone would help. "I'm going to help you." He approached slowly, hands visible. The child watched him with those huge golden eyes, confused and terrified. When he reached for the beam, she flinched but didn't try to attack. Jake lifted the metal carefully, and the moment she was free, she tried to crawl away. But her leg was badly injured. She collapsed after 2 feet, panting and crying. Jake pulled out his medical kit. It was designed for humans, but the basics would work. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, keep them alive. He approached the child again, moving slowly. She watched him, too hurt and tired to run anymore. Danny, give me your medical kit too, Jake said. Jake, this is insane. The captain is going to— I know what the captain is going to do, Jake interrupted. Just give me the kit. He worked quickly, applying pressure bandages to the worst wounds, injecting her with a general painkiller that seemed to work because she stopped whimpering. The child watched him the whole time, her breathing gradually slowing from panic to something more controlled. When he was done, he carefully picked her up. She was surprisingly light, her body trembling against his armor. Let's go, Jake said. The walk back to their base camp was tense. Nobody spoke. Jake carried the child, feeling her small heart beating fast against his chest. She had stopped crying but kept her head down as if expecting violence at any moment. Captain Grant was waiting when they arrived. His face went red when he saw what Jake was carrying. What the hell is that, Morrison? A child, sir. I found her in the wreckage. She was wounded. I administered first aid. You what? Grant's voice was deadly quiet. You were ordered to eliminate survivors, not bring them back for a damn tea party. With respect, sir, I don't kill children. Grant stepped closer, his jaw tight. That's not a child, Morrison. That's the enemy. Its people have killed thousands of our soldiers, destroyed our colonies, and you just compromised this entire operation by bringing it here. She's hurt and alone, sir. Whatever her people did, she's just a kid. Put it down and step away, Grant ordered. I'll handle this. Jake didn't move. He could feel the child tense in his arms, could feel her small hands grip his armor. No, sir. I won't. That's a direct order, Lieutenant. Then I'm refusing that order, sir. The tension was thick enough to cut. Jake could see the other soldiers watching, could see Grant's hand move toward his sidearm. For a moment, it looked like everything was going to fall apart right there. Then the communication officer, Sergeant Amy Price, called out, Sir, you need to hear this. The Valkorians are broadcasting on all channels. They're demanding a ceasefire. Grant turned away from Jake, his face confused. What? They say they want to negotiate. They're asking about a child, a missing child from that scout ship. Amy looked at Jake, her eyes wide. They say she's important. Really important. Grant stared at the child in Jake's arms. The little Valkorian was watching all of them with those huge eyes, not understanding the words but clearly sensing the danger. How important? Amy listened to her headset for a moment. They're saying she's royalty, sir. The daughter of their queen. The silence that followed was absolute. Jake looked down at the child in his arms. She looked back at him, and for just a moment something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or just the simple recognition of one living being who had helped another. Get her to medical, Grant said finally, his voice tight. And Morrison, you're confined to quarters pending investigation. We'll let command sort this mess out. As they took the child from Jake's arms, she reached for him, making a small sound of distress. He touched her hand briefly, trying to reassure her. It's okay, he said softly. You're safe now. He didn't know if she understood, but she stopped reaching and let them carry her away. Jake watched her go, feeling the weight of what he had done settling on his shoulders. He had disobeyed direct orders. He had saved an enemy. He had done it because it was right, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be consequences. As the guards escorted him to confinement, Jake looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Valkorian homeworld. Somewhere out there was a queen who had just learned that her daughter was alive because a human soldier had refused to follow orders. Jake wondered what would happen next. He wondered if he had just started something that would end in his execution or something else entirely. He wondered if the child would be okay, if she would remember the human who pulled her from the wreckage. He didn't know any of it. All he knew was that when the moment came, when he had to choose between orders and conscience, he had chosen conscience, and whatever came next, he would face it knowing he had done the right thing. The door to his quarters closed behind him. Jake sat on the narrow bunk and waited. Somewhere in the medical bay, a small alien child with pale blue scales was being treated by human doctors, and somewhere across the vast distance of space, a message was being sent that would change everything. The war was about to take a turn nobody had expected. All because one soldier had looked at an enemy child and seen only a child who needed help. Jake sat in his quarters for 2 days before anyone came to talk to him. They brought him food, let him shower, but nobody would answer his questions about the child or what was happening. He spent the time thinking about his life, about the choices that had led him here, about what his father would say if he knew his son might face a court-martial for saving a life. On the 3rd day, The door opened and Captain Grant walked in with two people Jake didn't recognize. One was a woman in an admiral's uniform, her gray hair pulled back tight, her face all business. The other was a man in civilian clothes, older with kind eyes and the careful posture of someone who spent their life in meetings. "Lieutenant Morrison," the woman said. "I'm Admiral Patricia Cole. This is Henry Brooks, Senior Diplomatic Advisor to Earth Command. We need to talk about what you did." Jake stood at attention. "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down," Cole said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't quite anger. "What you did was stupid, reckless, and completely against protocol." "Yes, ma'am. I understand that. Do you understand that you could have started an international incident? That bringing back an enemy combatant, even a young one, puts everyone on this base at risk?" "I understand that too, ma'am. But she wasn't a combatant. She was hurt and scared, and I couldn't just—" He stopped, unsure how to explain. Henry Brooks spoke up, his voice gentle. "You couldn't kill a child. Even an alien child, even though you've been trained to see them as the enemy." "No, sir. I couldn't," Brooks nodded slowly. "That says something about your character, Lieutenant. The question is whether it says something good or something that makes you unfit for service." Admiral Cole pulled out a tablet and set it on the table between them. "The child you rescued is named Zara. She's the only daughter of Queen Ashira, the supreme ruler of the entire Velkorian Empire. Do you understand what that means?" Jake felt his stomach drop. "That I rescued someone really important?" "That's one way to put it," Cole said dryly. "Another way is that you've created a political situation unlike anything in the history of this war. Queen Ashira herself has demanded a meeting. Not with me, not with our president." "With you? With me? Why?" Brooks leaned forward. "Because in Velkorian culture, saving a life creates what they call a bond. It's not just gratitude, it's a debt that must be repaid, a connection that can't be broken. By saving Princess Zara, you've bound yourself to the royal house of Velkoria. They take this very seriously." Jake tried to process this. "So what happens now?" "Now you get a crash course in xenodiplomacy," Cole said. "Because in 3 days you're going to meet Queen Ashira face to face. We've arranged a neutral meeting site, an old trade station that neither side has claimed. You're going to sit across from the most powerful Velkorian alive and somehow not cause an incident that restarts this war." The next 3 days were a blur. Jake learned about Velkorian culture from experts who had studied their society from a distance. He learned that they valued honor above all things, that they had complex hierarchies based on deeds and accomplishments, that family bonds were sacred, and debts between families even more so. He learned that their queen had ruled for 30 years, that she had fought her way to the throne through challenges and trials, that her people both feared and loved her. He learned that Princess Zara was her only child, born late in the queen's life, and that the entire empire had mourned when news came that her scout ship had been lost. The fact that she was alive was already being celebrated across Velkorian space. The fact that a human had saved her was causing debates and arguments among their people, just as it was among humans. When the day came for the meeting, Jake put on his dress uniform and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. He boarded a small shuttle with Admiral Cole, Henry Brooks, and a security team led by a stone-faced woman named Lieutenant Karen Mills. The journey to the neutral station took 4 hours, and Jake spent most of it staring out the window at the stars. The station was old, built back when humans and Velkorians had first made contact, before misunderstandings and fear had turned into violence. It floated in empty space, equidistant from both territories, a monument to what might have been. As their shuttle docked, Jake could see the Velkorian ships on the other side, sleek and organic-looking, like someone had grown them rather than built them. The meeting room was simple. A large table, chairs on both sides, and huge windows showing the stars beyond. The human delegation entered first and took their seats. Jake sat between Admiral Cole and Henry Brooks, feeling completely out of place. He was just a soldier. He had no business being here. Then the doors on the other side opened and the Velkorians entered. Jake had seen Velkorian warriors before, but never up close like this. They were tall, most of them over 7 feet, with scales that ranged from dark green to brown. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for creatures their size. The guards came first, their eyes scanning the room for threats, their hands near weapons that Jake hoped they wouldn't need. Then she entered, and Jake understood immediately why she was queen. Queen Ashira stood even taller than her guards, her scales a deep crimson that seemed to catch the light. Gold markings traced patterns across her face and arms, signs of rank or achievement that Jake didn't understand. Her eyes were bright gold, intelligent and fierce, and when they locked onto Jake, he felt like she was seeing right through him. She wore armor that looked ceremonial, beautiful but functional, with a long cape that flowed behind her. Around her neck was a pendant that glowed softly, some kind of crystal that pulsed with inner light. She moved to the table and stood there for a moment, studying each human in turn. When her gaze returned to Jake, she spoke in her own language. A series of clicks and hisses that the translator box on the table turned into words. "Which of you is Jake Morrison?" Jake stood, his heart pounding. "I am, Your Majesty." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, she moved around the table and approached him. Her guards tensed but didn't stop her. Admiral Cole started to stand, but Henry Brooks put a hand on her arm, stopping her. Queen Ashira stopped directly in front of Jake. She was so much taller that he had to look up to meet her eyes. For a moment, they just stared at each other, human and alien, separated by biology and culture and years of war. Then the Queen did something that made everyone in the room freeze. She knelt. It was a smooth, deliberate motion, lowering herself until her head was level with Jake's. Her guards made sounds of surprise, and Jake heard Admiral Cole gasp behind him. The translator picked up the Queen's next words clearly. "You saved my daughter when you could have let her die. You gave her medical care when you could have left her to suffer. You protected her when your own leaders ordered you to do otherwise. For this, I name you Savior bonded to the House of Ashira, now and for all time." Jake didn't know what to say. He could feel everyone watching him, waiting for him to do something. I just did what anyone should do." She was hurt. She needed help. The Queen's eyes seemed to shine brighter, but not everyone would have helped. Many would have followed their orders. Many would have seen only an enemy. You saw a child. That makes you different. She stood then, rising to her full height, and placed one scaled hand on Jake's shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle. "In my culture, a life debt is sacred. You have saved what is most precious to me. I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid, but I will spend my life trying. You are under my protection now, Jake Morrison. Anyone who harms you harms me. This I swear before witnesses." Henry Brooks stood then, speaking carefully. "Your Majesty, we appreciate your gratitude." Lieutenant Morrison acted from compassion, and we're glad that Princess Zara is safe. We hope this can be the beginning of better relations between our peoples. Queen Ashira turned to face the diplomat, and Jake could see something shift in her expression. "Better relations," she repeated. "Yes, that is what I want to discuss. This war between us has cost both our peoples dearly. It began from misunderstanding and has continued from pride and fear." "I wish to end it," Admiral Cole spoke up. "That's a bold statement, Your Majesty. But words alone won't end 3 years of conflict." "I know," the Queen said, "which is why I propose something more. Let Jake Morrison come to Valcoria as my guest. Let him see our world, meet our people, understand our culture. In return, I will send ambassadors to Earth. Let us learn about each other, truly learn, not through gun sights and battle reports." Jake felt everyone's eyes turn to him. Admiral Cole looked concerned. Henry Brooks looked thoughtful. The security team looked like they thought this was a trap. "And if I refuse?" Jake asked quietly. Queen Ashira met his eyes. "Then you refuse." "I will not force you. But I think you are curious, Jake Morrison. I think you want to understand why we fight. And I think you might be the bridge we need between our peoples." She was right. Jake was curious. More than that, he wanted to know if peace was possible. He wanted to believe that rescuing Zara could mean something more than just saving one life. "How long?" he asked. "As long as it takes," the Queen replied. "Weeks, perhaps months. Long enough for understanding to grow." Admiral Cole leaned close to Jake. "You don't have to do this. We can refuse on your behalf." But Jake was thinking about a small child with pale blue scales crying in a... The Valkorian ship that came to collect Jake was unlike anything he had seen before. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift color in the light. The inside was even more impressive, with walls that glowed softly and floors that felt almost soft under his boots. It was technology, but it felt alive somehow. Jake wasn't traveling alone. Earth Command had insisted he take a small team with him. Dr. Claire Warren was a linguistic specialist who had spent years studying Valkorian communication. She was excited about the chance to actually practice her skills with native speakers. Lieutenant Kyle Hayes was security, a quiet man with sharp eyes who made it clear he didn't trust the Valkorians at all, but would do his job anyway. The journey through Valkorian space took 3 days. Jake spent the time looking out the viewports at strange stars and planets, trying to wrap his mind around the fact that he was going where no human had gone before. The Valkorian crew was professional but distant, clearly unsure what to make of their human passengers. Only the captain, an older male named Vorak, spoke to them directly, making sure they had everything they needed. On the 3rd day, Valkoria came into view, and Jake pressed his face to the viewport like a child. The planet was beautiful, covered in swirling clouds of purple and blue with 3 moons hanging in the sky like silent guardians. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jake got his first real look at an alien civilization. The cities were incredible. Instead of the metal and glass towers of Earth, Valkorian structures seemed to grow from the ground like giant crystals. They caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns, making the whole city shimmer. Between the buildings were gardens and parks, green and wild, nature woven right into the urban landscape. Flying vehicles moved through the air in organized patterns, and Jake could see Valkorians on walkways and platforms going about their daily lives. The royal palace stood at the center of the capital city, a massive structure that rose high into the purple sky. It was made of some kind of white crystal that seemed to glow from within, with towers and spires that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. The ship landed on a platform near the top, and as the doors opened, Jake got his first breath of alien air. It was warmer than he expected, and it smelled like something between cinnamon and rain. The sky was a deeper blue than Earth's, and the sun was slightly orange. Everything felt familiar and alien at the same time. Queen Ashira was waiting for them, along with an honor guard and several officials wearing elaborate robes. She wore less armor now, more like formal dress, deep red with gold trim that matched the markings on her scales. When she saw Jake, she inclined her head in what might have been a smile. "Welcome to Valkoria, Jake Morrison. Welcome to my home." The translator boxes they wore turned her words into English smoothly. Jake bowed, not sure what the proper greeting was. "Thank you for having us, Your Majesty. Come," she said. "I will show you to your quarters and then we will talk. You must have many questions." The palace was a maze of corridors and chambers, each more impressive than the last. They passed rooms with walls of living plants, chambers filled with technology Jake couldn't begin to understand, and halls decorated with art and sculptures that told stories Jake wished he could read. Valkorians stopped to stare as they passed, their golden eyes tracking the humans with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Their quarters were in one of the palace towers, with huge windows overlooking the city. The rooms were large and comfortable, with furniture that had been adapted for human proportions. There were 3 bedrooms, a common area, and a space that looked like it was meant for working. On a table in the center was a selection of food, some familiar from Earth and some clearly Valkorian. "I hope this will be acceptable," Queen Ashira said. "If you need anything, speak to the servants. They have been instructed to help you however they can." "It's more than acceptable," Jake said, looking around. "It's incredible." The Queen seemed pleased. "Rest for now. Tomorrow Princess Zara wants to see you. She has not stopped talking about you since she returned." Over the following days, Jake began to understand the Valkorian world. Claire was in heaven, spending hours with Valkorian scholars learning the intricacies of their language and culture. Kyle remained suspicious but had to admit that no one had tried to harm them or restrict their movements. They were free to explore the palace and even parts of the city, though they always had guards nearby. Whether the guards were for their protection or to watch them, Jake wasn't sure. Princess Zara became his constant companion. She was a bright, curious child who had recovered fully from her injuries, and now seemed determined to show Jake everything about her world. She would appear at his quarters early in the morning, chattering away in a mix of Valkorian and broken English that she was learning from Claire. She dragged him through gardens where plants glowed in the twilight, showed him pools where strange fish swam in patterns like living art, and introduced him to palace pets that looked like a cross between cats and lizards. Through Zara, Jake saw Valkoria without the filter of war. He saw a world where people cared for their families, worked at jobs they took pride in, and gathered in the evenings to share food and stories. They weren't monsters. They were just people, different in appearance but not so different in heart. One evening, Zara took him to what she called the Memory Gardens. It was a quiet place at the edge of the palace grounds, filled with trees that had silver leaves and flowers that sang in the wind. Small stones were placed throughout the garden, each one carved with symbols Jake didn't recognize. "These are for people who died," Zara explained, her voice soft. "Every family can put a stone here if they want. My father has one here." Jake hadn't known the queen had lost her mate. "I'm sorry. He died before I was born," Zara said. "In the war. Fighting humans." The words hung in the air between them. Jake looked at the stones and realized what they represented. How many of these markers were for Velkorians who had died fighting his people? How many human memorial gardens had stones for people killed by Velkorians? "I'm sorry," he said again, meaning it more deeply this time. Zara looked up at him with those big golden eyes. "Mother says the war is stupid. She says both sides are hurt and angry and nobody remembers why it started. She says you saved me because you're not stupid like the war is." Jake had to smile at that. "Your mother is a wise person. She likes you," Zara said suddenly. "She watches you when she thinks nobody sees. She says you're interesting." Before Jake could figure out how to respond to that, Zara ran off to chase something that looked like a flying butterfly, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. His private audience with Queen Ashira came a few weeks into his stay. She invited him to her personal chambers, a space high in the palace with windows on all sides that gave a view of the entire city. The room was simpler than he expected, with fewer decorations and more personal touches. Books on shelves, what looked like family pictures, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than ceremony. The queen was different here too. She still carried herself with authority, but there was a softness to her expression that Jake hadn't seen in the formal settings. She wore simple clothes, dark blue without the royal decorations, and her scales seemed to catch the sunset light coming through the windows. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her own. "We should talk without advisors and guards listening to every word." Jake sat, suddenly nervous. Alone with the queen in her private space felt more dangerous than any battlefield. "You have been here for several weeks now," Ashira began. "What do you think of my world?" "It's beautiful," Jake said honestly. "Different than Earth, but beautiful. Your people are not what I was taught to expect. And what were you taught? That you were monsters. Ruthless, cruel, bent on destroying humanity." Ashira made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We were taught similar things about humans. That you were barbaric, violent, incapable of understanding honor or civilization. Both our peoples are good at making enemies of what they don't understand." "How did this start?" Jake asked. "The war, I mean. Nobody on Earth seems to know the real story." The queen was quiet for a long moment, looking out at her city. "It started with fear. When our species first made contact, there were misunderstandings. Your ships came to a system we considered sacred. We saw it as invasion. You saw our response as aggression. Both sides escalated. Pride and fear did the rest. That's it. A misunderstanding that turned into 3 years of war. Most wars start that way," Ashira said quietly. "The reasons seem important at the time. Looking back, they seem foolish. But once blood has been spilled, pride demands more blood. Honor demands revenge. The cycle continues." "You want to end it," Jake said. "It wasn't a question, I do. But ending a war is harder than starting one. I have advisors who think I'm weak for even considering peace. They point to our dead and demand justice. They see your presence here as an insult." "Then why am I here?" Ashira turned to look at him directly. "Because you saved my daughter when you had every reason to let her die. Because you showed me that not all humans are what I was taught to believe. Because I think you might help me show my people the same thing." Weeks turned into months, and Jake found himself settling into a life he never could have imagined. The palace became familiar, its winding corridors no longer confusing, its routines comfortable. He woke each morning to the purple dawn, ate breakfast with Claire and Kyle while discussing their observations, and spent his days learning everything he could about Velkorian culture. But it wasn't just about learning. Jake had become something more than a guest. Queen Ashira had started including him in meetings with her advisors, asking his opinion on matters of policy and strategy. At first, the other Velkorians had been hostile to his presence, their eyes cold and their responses clipped. But slowly, as they saw that Jake listened more than he spoke and that his suggestions came from genuine desire to help, some of them began to warm to him. Not all of them, though. General Thax, the commander of the Velkorian military, made no secret of his contempt. He was a massive male with dark green scales and scars across his face that spoke of many battles. During meetings, he would watch Jake with barely concealed hostility, his clawed hands flexing whenever Jake spoke. "You bring a human into our councils," Thax had said during one particularly tense session. "A warrior who has killed our people. And we are expected to trust his words?" Queen Ashira had responded with ice in her voice. "Jake Morrison saved my daughter. His bond to this house is sacred. If you question my judgment in this, Thax, you question my right to rule." The general had backed down, but Jake could feel his hatred like a physical weight. It was a reminder that peace was fragile, that plenty of people on both sides wanted the war to continue. Back on Earth, the situation was complicated too. Jake received regular communications from home, and they were mixed. Some praised him as a hero working for peace. Others called him a traitor, living comfortably with the enemy while human soldiers were still dying. The media couldn't decide if he was brave or foolish, a diplomat or a dupe. His mother sent messages full of worry and love, begging him to come home. His former squad mates were confused, some supportive and others feeling betrayed. Captain Grant had been reassigned and refused to speak to Jake at all. The hardest part was learning about casualties. Every week brought news of skirmishes, of people dying on both sides while he lived safely in a palace. It made him question everything. Was he really helping, or was he just hiding from the war behind pretty words about peace? Claire noticed his dark moods. One evening, she found him on one of the palace balconies staring at the city lights below. She sat beside him without asking permission, her presence comfortable and familiar. "You're thinking about the casualties," she said. It wasn't a question. How can I not? People are dying while I'm here playing diplomat. "You're not playing at anything," Claire said firmly. "You're doing something harder than fighting. You're trying to end the reasons people fight in the first place. What if I'm wrong? What if this is all just making things worse?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I've been studying their culture for years, Jake. From a distance, from intercepted communications and captured documents. But being here, talking to actual Velkorians, learning from them directly, I've learned more in these months than in all those years combined. That matters. Understanding matters. And you made this possible." Jake wanted to believe her, but doubt was a hard thing to shake. What he didn't expect was how his relationship with Queen Ashira would change. At first, their interactions had been formal, careful. She was the queen, he was the human soldier. But as time passed and they spent more hours in meetings and conversations, something shifted. He started noticing small things. The way she would seek his opinion even in casual conversation. How she would sometimes touch his shoulder when making a point. A gesture that seemed unconscious but felt meaningful. The way her eyes would find him in a crowded room, as if checking that he was still there. Elder Mira, one of the Queen's oldest advisors, pulled Jake aside one day. She was ancient by Velkorian standards, her scales faded to a pale gray, but her mind was sharp as ever. "The Queen trusts you," Mira said without preamble, "more than she has trusted anyone in a very long time." "I'm honored by that," Jake replied carefully. "Are you?" Mira's golden eyes studied him intently. "Or are you frightened by it? Because you should understand what it means in our culture. Trust is not given lightly, especially by someone in her position." "I'm not sure I understand." Mira made a sound that might have been amusement. "Then you are more innocent than I thought. The Queen has been alone for a long time, Jake Morrison. She has duty and responsibility, but few she can speak to as an equal. Fewer still she can trust with her doubts and fears. You have become that person. I'm just trying to help, and that is why she trusts you, because you ask for nothing in return." Mira turned to leave, then paused. "Our culture has customs around such trust. Gestures that show gratitude and connection. You should be aware that the Queen has been making these gestures toward you." "What kind of gestures?" But Mira was already walking away, leaving Jake more confused than ever. He started paying attention after that, and Mira was right. The Queen had been giving him gifts, a crystal that pulsed with warmth when he held it, attuned to his biosignature in a way that Claire said was highly personal in Velkorian culture, an invitation to walk in her private gardens during the evening, when the bioluminescent plants created patterns of light that took his breath away, the way she would sit closer to him during meetings, her presence a steady warmth at his side. The realization hit him one evening when she invited him to share a meal in her chambers. It was just the two of them, no advisors or servants hovering nearby. She had prepared the food herself, a mix of human and Velcorian dishes, and they ate while watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up as a royal, about the weight of expectations and the loneliness of leadership. He told her about Earth, about growing up in a small town, about joining the military because he wanted to make a difference. At some point, the conversation turned more personal. "Do you miss your home?" Ashira asked. "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "I miss my family, my friends. The familiar things, but I don't regret being here. Even though it has cost you." She knew about the criticism he faced, the accusations of betrayal. Even then, what we're trying to do here, building understanding between our peoples, it's worth the cost. Ashira was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "I have not had someone to talk to like this in years. Since my mate died, I have been alone with my thoughts and my duties. It is refreshing to have someone who listens, who challenges my ideas, who is not afraid to disagree with me." "I'm not trying to overstep," Jake said quickly. "You're not." She turned to look at him directly. "You're being honest. I value that more than you know." There was something in her eyes that made Jake's heart beat faster, something that transcended species and culture, a connection that he felt but wasn't sure he should acknowledge. "Jake Morrison," she said softly, "you confuse me." "I confuse you? You are so different from what I expected, from what I was taught humans would be. You are kind where I expected cruelty, thoughtful where I expected aggression. You care about my people even though they were your enemies." She paused. "You make me question many things I thought I knew. Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said, "but it is dangerous. For both of us." Jake understood what she meant. There were lines here, boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. She was a queen, he was a human. They were from different worlds, different species. Whatever he was feeling, whatever she might be feeling, it was complicated by politics and duty and the weight of history. But sitting there in the soft light of her chambers, watching the way she looked at him, Jake had to admit the truth to himself. He cared about her, not just as a queen or an ally, but as a person. He admired her strength and her wisdom, her dedication to her people, and her willingness to seek peace when it would have been easier to continue the war. He liked the sound of her voice, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about things she was passionate about, the rare moments when she let her guard down and showed him the person behind the crown. It was dangerous. Mira had been right about that. But it was also real. Zara burst into the room without warning, as she often did, chattering about something she wanted to show Jake. The moment between him and Ashira broke, and they both turned their attention to the excited child. But as Zara dragged Jake away to see whatever new discovery she had made, he caught Ashira's eye. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, but there was warmth in it, and something that might have been hope. That night, lying in his bed and staring at the alien stars through his window, Jake had to confront an impossible question. What happened if a human soldier fell for an alien queen? What happened if she felt the same way? In all the history of two species, in all the complications of war and peace, where was there room for something as simple and as complex as two people finding connection? He didn't have answers, but he knew that whatever happened next, his life would never be simple again. Kyle found him the next morning looking exhausted. "You okay, man?" "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "I think I'm in over my head." The first sign something was wrong came from an unlikely source. Princess Zara had been unusually quiet for 2 days, not her normal cheerful self. When Jake found her sitting alone in one of the gardens, she looked worried in a way that children shouldn't have to be. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him with those big golden eyes. "I heard General Thax talking to other soldiers. They were saying bad things about you, about Mother." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of things?" "They said Mother is weak, that she cares more about humans than her own people, that you're making her forget her duty." Zara's voice dropped to a whisper. "They said she should never have let you come here." "It's okay," Jake said, trying to reassure her even as his mind raced. "Adults say things when they're angry or scared. It doesn't mean anything will happen." But Zara grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "No, Jake, they said something else. They said they would fix things. They said there were friends on Earth who thought the same way." That together they could make sure the war continues. Jake's blood ran cold. Zara, this is important. Did they say anything specific? Any names or plans? She shook her head. I was scared. I ran away before they saw me. Jake pulled her into a hug. You did the right thing telling me. I'll handle this, okay? Don't worry, but he was very worried. A conspiracy involving military officers on both sides was exactly the kind of thing that could destroy everything they had been working toward. He needed to tell Ashira, but he needed evidence. The word of a child, even a princess, might not be enough to move against someone as powerful as General Thax. He found Kyle and Claire and told them what Zara had said. Kyle's expression went grim. I've been noticing increased military communications. Encrypted, which isn't unusual, but the volume has gone up significantly in the past week. Can you decrypt them? Jake asked, not without better equipment, but Claire might have another option. Claire looked thoughtful. I've made friends with some of the junior scholars in the palace. They're young, idealistic, believe in peace. One of them mentioned that he sometimes handles translations for military communications. If I ask carefully, he might share what he knows. It took 3 days of careful investigation, 3 days during which Jake tried to act normal while watching everyone around him with new suspicion. General Thax attended meetings as usual, his hostile gaze following Jake but giving nothing away. Other military officers who had always been cold to Jake now seemed actively threatening. Claire's scholar friend came through. He brought her transcripts of communications he had translated, messages that made Jake's stomach turn. There was indeed a conspiracy, coordinated between hardline elements in both militaries. General Thax was working with a human colonel named Martin Webb, a man who believed that peace was surrender and that the only good alien was a dead alien. Their plan was simple and devastating. They would stage simultaneous attacks on a Velcorian colony and an Earth station, using weapons and tactics that would make it look like the other side had betrayed the peace talks. The ceasefire would collapse, the war would resume, and people like Jake and Queen Ashira, who advocated for peace, would be discredited. The attacks were scheduled for 3 days from now. Jake took the evidence straight to Queen Ashira. He found her in a strategy meeting with several advisors, including General Thax. His presence there, knowing what Jake now knew, was like poison in the room. Your Majesty, Jake said, interrupting the meeting, I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent. Ashira saw something in his face that made her stand immediately. We will resume this meeting later, she announced to the assembled advisors. Thax's eyes narrowed, but he filed out with the others. Once they were alone, Jake laid out everything. The conversation Zara had overheard, the communications Claire had obtained, the entire conspiracy. Ashira listened without interrupting, her expression growing colder with each revelation. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the window, her back rigid with tension. Thax, she said quietly. I trusted him. He has served this empire for decades. I'm sorry, Jake said. I know this isn't easy. She turned to face him, and he was shocked to see pain in her eyes. Do you know what it is like to learn that your own people would betray you? That they would kill innocents to maintain a war? Yes, Jake said softly. Because my people are doing the same thing. Colonel Webb is one of ours. This conspiracy cuts both ways. Ashira moved to him then, faster than he expected, and placed both hands on his shoulders. You brought this to me. You could have stayed silent, let the attacks happen. Let the peace talks fail. You would have been safe either way. But you chose to warn me. Why? Because it's wrong, Jake said simply. Because innocent people would die. Because everything we've been working for would be destroyed. Because He stopped, unsure how to finish. Because you care, Ashira finished for him. About my people. About peace, about... She didn't finish either, but her hands tightened on his shoulders. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Ashira stepped back, her expression shifting from vulnerable to determined. We need to act quickly. Contact your Earth Command. Tell them about Webb. I will deal with Thax. How? Jake asked. If you move against him without solid proof, it could cause a military uprising. Then we get solid proof. We catch them in the act. Over the next 2 days, they worked frantically. Jake coordinated with Admiral Cole back on Earth, sending encrypted messages with the evidence they had gathered. Cole was horrified to learn of Webb's involvement, but promised to investigate. Meanwhile, Ashira worked with her few trusted advisors to set a trap for the conspirators. The plan was risky. They would let the conspiracy believe they were succeeding, right up until the moment the attacks were launched. Then they would expose everything, showing both civilizations that extremists on both sides were working together to undermine peace. Jake barely slept those 2 days. He helped coordinate communications, worked with Kyle to monitor military movements, and tried to keep Zara from worrying. The little princess knew something was wrong, but she trusted Jake when he told her everything would be okay. The night before the planned attacks, Jake couldn't settle. He wandered the palace halls, his mind racing with everything that could go wrong. He found himself outside Ashira's chambers, not really planning to disturb her but drawn there anyway. She must have sensed his presence because the door opened. She stood there in simple sleeping clothes, her scales dim in the low light. "Jake," she said quietly, "I cannot sleep either. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. You're not." She stepped aside. "Come in." Her private chambers were dimly lit, intimate in a way the formal spaces never were. Jake entered hesitantly, very aware that this was crossing lines they had been careful not to cross. "Tomorrow everything could go wrong," Jake said. "The attacks could succeed. People could die. The peace we've worked for could shatter." "Yes," Ashira agreed. "All of that is possible. How are you so calm?" She turned to look at him, and in the dim light her eyes seemed to glow. "I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I have learned to carry fear without letting it control me. It is part of being a leader. I wish I had that skill." "You have other skills," she said softly. "You have compassion that crosses boundaries. You have courage that makes you do the right thing even when it's hard. You have a heart that sees people instead of enemies." She paused. "You have changed me, Jake Morrison. Changed how I see the universe." "You've changed me too," Jake admitted. "I came here thinking I was helping make peace. But really I've been learning what peace means. What it looks like when you stop seeing others as enemies and start seeing them as people." Ashira moved closer to him. "And what do you see when you look at me? Do you see a queen? An alien, an enemy?" Jake met her gaze. "I see someone strong and wise and dedicated to her people. I see someone who carries enormous responsibility but never complains. I see someone who wants to do right, even when it's difficult." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I see someone I've come to care about very much." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. They were standing close now, close enough that Jake could feel the warmth radiating from her scales. Different biology, different species, but the connection between them felt as real as anything he had ever experienced. "This is impossible," Ashira said, but she didn't move away. "There are no protocols for this. No traditions that cover a queen and a human. I know. My advisors would be scandalized. Your people would think you mad. I know that too. And yet," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I find I do not care what they think, only what you think. What you feel." Jake reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face. Her scales were smooth and warm, different than human skin, but not unpleasant. She closed her eyes at the contact, leaning into his touch. "I care about you," Jake said. "More than I should, probably more than is wise. But I can't help it." "Nor can I," Ashira replied. She opened her eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that having you here, knowing you, has been one of the greatest gifts of my life." They stood there in the dim light, two beings from different worlds finding. The week following the conspiracy's exposure was a blur of interviews, statements, and political maneuvering. Both Earth and Valcoria had to process the shocking revelation that their own military leaders had worked together to undermine peace efforts. Public opinion on both worlds was divided, angry, and confused. Jake became the center of attention he never wanted. News crews from Earth requested interviews constantly. Some called him a hero who had prevented a catastrophe. Others questioned his loyalty, suggesting he had been manipulated by the Valcorians. The fact that he had been living in the palace for months, that he had become close to Queen Ashira, was dissected and analyzed by everyone with an opinion. Admiral Cole arrived on Valcoria 3 days after the crisis, bringing with her a delegation from Earth Command. Jake met with them in one of the palace's formal chambers, very aware of how different he looked now. His uniform had been replaced by clothes that were a mix of human and Valcorian styles, comfortable and practical. He had let his hair grow longer, and he moved through the palace with the ease of someone who belonged there. Lieutenant Morrison, Cole began formally, though her eyes were warm. You've done remarkable work here. Your actions prevented a disaster that could have cost thousands of lives on both sides. Thank you, ma'am. Earth Command wants you to come home, she continued. You're being promoted to captain. There's talk of a medal, possibly several. You'll be valuable in helping us understand Valkorian culture as we work toward a formal peace treaty. It was everything Jake should want. Recognition, advancement, a return to his own people. But the words felt hollow somehow. What if I said I want to stay? Jake asked quietly. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Is that what you want? I don't know, Jake admitted. This place has become important to me. The work I'm doing here, the people I've met, I'm not sure I'm ready to leave. The people you've met, Cole repeated, and there was understanding in her tone. Including Queen Ashira. Jake met her gaze steadily. Yes, ma'am. Including the Queen. Cole was quiet for a moment, then dismissed the others in the room. When they were alone, she sat back and studied Jake carefully. Tell me honestly, what's happening between you and her? I don't know how to answer that, Jake said. We've become close. She's shown me a side of Valkorian culture that most humans never see. We've worked together to build something that might actually lead to peace. And along the way, we've become friends. Maybe more than friends? More than friends with an alien queen, Cole said, not making it a question. You understand how complicated that is? I understand it's impossible by every reasonable standard. Different species, different worlds, different everything. But it doesn't change how I feel. Cole sighed. You've always been someone who follows his conscience, Jake. That's why you saved that child in the first place. I'm not going to order you home if you truly believe your place is here. But I need you to think carefully about what you're choosing. Over the next few days, Jake did think about it. He walked through the city with Kyle and Claire, observing the Valkorian people going about their lives. He visited markets where vendors sold strange fruits and craftspeople displayed their work. He watched children playing in parks, their laughter transcending language barriers. Claire pulled him aside one afternoon. I've been offered a position here, she said. Permanent liaison and cultural advisor. They want someone who understands both languages and cultures. Are you going to take it? She smiled. I already said yes. Jake, I've spent my whole career studying Valkorians from a distance. Being here, learning from them directly, it's everything I ever wanted. Plus, I've met someone, a scholar named Kilos. We've been working together and it's been amazing. I'm happy for you, Jake said genuinely. The question is, what will you do? Because I see the way you look at the Queen, and the way she looks at you. That's not just political alliance or friendship. Jake didn't have an answer for her. The answer came from an unexpected source. That evening, Queen Ashira summoned him to the throne room. It was a formal summons delivered by official messengers, and Jake's stomach twisted with worry as he made his way there. The throne room was full. Valkorian nobles and officials lined the walls, along with the Earth delegation including Admiral Cole. At the center, on her throne of crystal and metal, sat Queen Ashira in full royal regalia. She looked every inch the powerful ruler, commanding and distant. Jake approached and bowed as protocol demanded. Your Majesty, Ashira stood and the room went silent. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner. Jake Morrison, you came to this world as a stranger, a member of a species we were at war with, but your actions have proven you to be something more. You saved my daughter. You have worked tirelessly for peace. You have shown my people that humans can be honorable, compassionate, and trustworthy. She descended from the throne, walking toward him with measured steps. You have become valued advisor, trusted friend, and someone I have come to rely upon. Your presence here has changed minds and opened possibilities that once seemed impossible. She stopped directly in front of him, and Jake saw warmth in her golden eyes beneath the formal mask. I wish to make an offer to you before witnesses from both our peoples. Jake's heart was pounding. He had no idea what was coming. In Valkorian culture, Ashira continued, when someone proves themselves invaluable to the ruling house, when they demonstrate wisdom, courage, and loyalty beyond question, they may be offered a place of high honor. I offer you such a place now. She gestured, and an attendant brought forward a crystal pendant on a chain, similar to the one Ashira wore, but smaller. It glowed with soft blue light. I name you consort to the throne. Not just an advisor, but a partner in leadership, someone who stands beside the Queen as an equal, who has voice in all matters of state, who represents a bridge between our peoples. Her voice softened slightly. Someone who is family. The room erupted in murmurs. This was unprecedented, impossible by Valkorian tradition. A human as royal consort? It was radical even by the standards of everything else that had happened. Ashira raised a hand for silence. I know this breaks with tradition, but these are times that demand new traditions. Jake Morrison has earned this honor through his deeds. More than that, I choose him for this role because I trust him, value him, and wish him to remain here at my side. She held the pendant out to him. The choice is yours. Accept this and you become part of the royal house. You would have responsibilities, power, and a permanent place here, but you would also leave behind your old life, your chance to return to Earth as a hero, your place among your own people. Jake stared at the glowing crystal. In it, he saw his future splitting into two paths. Accept, and he stayed here in this alien world, bound to a queen, bridging two civilizations but forever changed from the simple soldier he had been. Decline, and he returned to Earth, to recognition and familiarity, but always wondering what might have been. He looked at Ashira. Really looked at her, past the formal presentation to the person beneath. He saw hope in her eyes and vulnerability, and something that looked like fear that he might say no. He thought about Zara, who had become like a daughter to him. He thought about the Valkorian people he had come to know, no longer enemies but individuals with hopes and dreams. He thought about the work still to be done, building peace between two civilizations that had been trying to destroy each other. Most of all, he thought about Ashira, about late-night conversations where she dropped her formal mask and showed him her true self, about the way she listened to his ideas, challenged his assumptions, made him think deeper and reach farther, about the connection they had built, defying all logic and reason. I have a question, Jake said quietly. Ask. Is this offer only political? A way to cement the alliance between our peoples? Ashira's formal expression cracked slightly. Would you accept if it was? I need to know the truth. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, meant for him though everyone could hear. The political benefits are real. You as consort would be a powerful symbol of cooperation, but that is not why I offer this. I offer it because I want you to stay, because I have grown accustomed to your presence and dread the thought of you leaving, because you have become someone I care for deeply, in ways I never expected to feel again. The room was utterly silent. Everyone was watching, witnessing this moment of truth between a queen and a human soldier. Because, Ashira continued, somewhere between your arrival and now, you became essential to me, not as a political tool, but as a person I trust, respect, and have come to love. The final word hung in the air. Love. Between a human and a Valkorian, between a soldier and a queen, between two beings who should have been enemies, Jake reached out and took the pendant from her hands. The crystal was warm against his palm, pulsing with gentle light that seemed to respond to his touch. I accept, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the room. I accept the honor, the responsibility, and everything that comes with it. Not because of duty or politics, but because this is where I choose to be, with you, with Zara, with the work we're building together. He placed the chain around his neck and the crystal settled against his. The formal bonding ceremony took place 3 months after Jake accepted his position as consort. It was unlike any wedding Earth had ever seen, and unlike any Valkorian ceremony in their history. They created something new, weaving together traditions from both cultures into something that belonged to neither and both at once. The ceremony was held in the palace's grand hall, a space large enough to accommodate guests from both worlds. Representatives from Earth arrived, including Admiral Cole, several diplomats, and surprisingly Jake's mother. She had been hesitant but ultimately decided she needed to see what her son had chosen. When Jake met her at the landing platform, she hugged him tight and whispered, I still don't understand this, but I'm trying to. That's all I ask, Jake replied. The Valkorian guests were equally mixed. Some came out of duty, others out of genuine support for their queen's unprecedented choice. Elder Mira was there, her ancient eyes twinkling with what might have been amusement. Even some of the conservative nobles attended, if only to witness history being made. The ceremony began at sunset. When both Earth's sun and Valkoria's star could be seen in the sky, a symbolic moment chosen carefully. Jake wore formal clothes that combined human military dress with Velkorian royal colors, feeling simultaneously himself and completely transformed. Ashira wore ceremonial armor made of crystal and precious metals, beautiful and fierce, every inch the warrior queen. Claire served as one of the officiants along with a Velkorian priest, both speaking in their respective languages with translation for all to hear. The ceremony included elements Jake recognized, like the exchange of vows, and elements that were completely alien, like the ritual where they shared breath, a Velkorian symbol of life bonding. When it came time for vows, Jake spoke clearly, his words transmitted across both worlds. I promise to stand beside you, to support your people as my own, to build bridges where there were walls. I promise to be honest, loyal, and true. I promise to see you not just as a queen, but as the person you are. I choose you freely and completely. Ashira's voice was equally steady. I promise to honor you, to value your counsel, to protect you as you have protected my daughter. I promise to build with you a future where our peoples can coexist in peace. I promise to cherish what we have found together, this connection that defies expectation. I choose you, Jake Morrison, now and for all the days to come. They sealed the bond with gestures from both cultures, a kiss which made the human guests smile and the Velkorian guests look confused, and a pressing of foreheads which made the Velkorians nod in approval and the humans look puzzled. It was imperfect, awkward, and absolutely genuine. The celebration that followed was chaotic in the best way. Human food and Velkorian delicacies were served side by side. Music from both worlds played, sometimes clashing but somehow creating something new. People from different species who had been enemies mingled, talked, and slowly began to understand each other. Jake's mother cornered him at one point, her eyes studying Ashira across the room. She really loves you, she said finally. I can see it even if she's not human. The way she looks at you, it's the same way I looked at your father. I love her too, Mom. She hugged him again. Then I'm happy for you. It's strange and frightening and nothing I ever imagined. But if you're happy, that's what matters. Zara was everywhere at once, excited to be the center of attention and proudly telling anyone who would listen that Jake was officially her family now. She wore a dress made of fabric from Earth and crystals from Velkoria, another symbol of two worlds coming together. The ceremony was broadcast across both civilizations, watched by billions. Reactions were predictable. Some saw it as a triumph of love and unity, others saw it as a stunt or betrayal. But everyone saw it, and that mattered. It was impossible now to pretend that humans and Velkorians couldn't connect, couldn't build something together. The real work began the next day. Jake's position as consort gave him real authority, and he intended to use it. He worked with Claire to establish the first joint university, where students from both species would study together. It faced enormous opposition, but Ashira backed him completely, and slowly, reluctantly, the project moved forward. He pushed for trade agreements that benefited both worlds, for scientific collaborations that pooled their knowledge, for cultural exchanges that let people see each other as individuals rather than abstract enemies. Every victory was small and hard-won. Every setback felt like it might undo everything. 6 months after the ceremony, the first human students arrived on Velkoria. There were only 20 of them, selected carefully for their open minds and adaptability. Jake met them personally, seeing his own confusion and wonder reflected in their faces. It's going to be hard, he told them honestly. You're going to feel out of place, strange, maybe scared. But you're also going to learn things no human has ever learned before. You're pioneers. One young woman raised her hand. Is it true you married an alien queen? Jake smiled. I bonded with Queen Ashira, yes. And it's been the best decision of my life. But how? Another student asked. How do you make it work when you're so different? By focusing on what's the same, Jake replied. We both want peace. We both care about our peoples. We both believe in building something better. Start there, and the differences become less important. The Velkorian students who joined the program were equally uncertain. Jake watched them interact with the humans awkwardly at first, then gradually warming. By the end of the first semester, he saw groups of mixed species studying together, sharing meals, even becoming friends. It wasn't always smooth. There were incidents, misunderstandings, and moments when the cultural gap seemed too wide. A human student insulted a Velkorian without meaning to. causing a diplomatic incident that took weeks to resolve. A Velkorian teacher assigned work that was impossible for human biology, leading to complaints and tension, but they worked through it. Every problem became a lesson, every conflict an opportunity to build better understanding. And slowly, painfully slowly, things improved. Jake's relationship with Ashira continued to deepen. They governed together, making decisions that affected millions. But they also had quiet moments, evenings where they could drop their formal roles and just be together. They walked in gardens under alien stars. They shared meals and talked about everything from philosophy to gossip. They learned each other's languages fluently, switching between them without thought. Physical affection was complicated between species, but they found their own ways. The press of foreheads that meant intimacy to Velkorians, hand-holding that was meaningful to humans, quiet companionship that transcended biology. One evening, a year after Jake had become consort, Ashira asked him a question that made his heart stop. "Would you want children?" Jake stared at her. "Is that even possible? Between our species? Our scientists have been researching it. With genetic adaptation and careful medical management, they believe it could be done. Not naturally, but through advanced procedures. A child that would carry traits from both of us, both our peoples. That's incredible. But is it wise? The complications, the questions about what such a child would be, all valid concerns." Ashira agreed. "But imagine what it would represent. Living proof that our species can create a future together, a bridge in the most literal sense." Jake thought about it carefully. "I would want children with you. Whether that's possible biologically or through adoption, I would love to raise a family with you, but only if you want it too, and only if we can ensure any child we have would be loved and protected." Ashira's eyes shone. "Then we will explore it. Carefully, thoughtfully. But we will explore the possibility." The announcement that they were considering having a child sent new shockwaves through both worlds. Scientists on both sides debated the ethics and practicality. Religious leaders argued about what it meant. Regular people wondered if such a child would be human, Velkorian, or something entirely new. But while the debates raged, life continued. More students joined the exchange program. Trade agreements were signed. Joint military operations were conducted against pirates who threatened both species. The Velkorian language started being taught in Earth schools. Human art appeared in Velkorian galleries. It was slow. There were still people on both sides who opposed everything Jake and Ashira were building. There were protests, incidents, and moments when it seemed like the old hatreds might win. General Thax's supporters still existed, bitter and resentful. Colonel Webb's allies on Earth continued to spread propaganda against the peace. But for every voice of hate, there were more voices for unity. For every person who saw aliens as enemies, there were others who saw people. The tide was turning, slowly but surely. 2 years after rescuing Zara from that crashed ship, Jake stood on a platform with Ashira, addressing a joint assembly of human and Velkorian leaders. It was the first formal council where both governments met as equals, working together rather than against each other. "We stand here today," Jake said, his words translated instantly for all to hear, "because of a choice to save a life rather than take it, a choice to build rather than destroy, a choice to see each other as people rather than enemies."